She slammed the glass down so hard it shattered. "You let me believe you were nobody," Sophia said, her voice shaking. "You sat across from me every single night and you lied to my face." Adrian Moretti did not flinch. He just looked at her with those quiet, steady eyes, the same eyes she had trusted completely, and said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say. If you've ever loved someone who turned out to be a stranger, stay with me. Subscribe to this channel. Follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Sofia Marquez had a rule about men. She did not make exceptions for them. She did not rearrange her life for them. She did not give them the soft private parts of herself that took years to grow back after someone tore them out. She had learned that lesson at 23, when Daniel Reyes, her father's business partner, her father's closest friend, the man who had sat at their dinner table every Sunday for 6 years, signed his name on a set of documents that transferred ownership of Marquez family kitchen directly into his own hands. Her father had trusted him completely. Her father had trusted him the way a man trusts his own reflection, and Daniel had smiled at that trust, like it was a gift he had been waiting a long time to receive. The restaurant had been in the Marquez family for 31 years. Her grandfather had started it with nothing but a rented kitchen and a handful of recipes written on the back of grocery receipts. Her father had expanded it, improved it, turned it into something the neighborhood recognized and loved. Sophia had grown up in that kitchen, doing homework at the corner table, washing dishes on weekend nights, learning the names of every regular customer before she was old enough to take orders. All of it gone. In a single afternoon, with a set of fraudulent signatures and a legal maneuver so clean that even their lawyer shook his head in disbelief. Daniel Reyes took everything. Her father never fully recovered. Sophia did not give herself the option of not recovering. She moved to New York City, found a bartending job at a restaurant called Carmine's on the Lower East Side, and rebuilt herself the only way she knew how, quietly, carefully, and without asking anyone for help she did not earn. By 27, she was good at her job, and she was good at keeping people at a comfortable distance. She was warm enough that customers came back. She was professional enough that her boss never had a complaint. She was guarded enough that no one ever got close enough to see the places where she was still broken. That was the life she had made for herself, and she was fine with it. Right up until the Tuesday morning in October, when Adrian Moretti walked through the back door of Carmine's and introduced himself as the new hire. He was not what she expected from a man answering a want ad for a bartender position. He was tall, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that filled a room without trying. He had dark hair that was just beginning to thread with silver at the temples, the kind of hands that looked like they had done serious work, and a face that was composed in a way that made it difficult to read. Not cold, not unfriendly, just contained. Like a man who had made a private decision a long time ago not to let the outside world see too much of what was happening inside. He wore a plain dark shirt. No jewelry, no expensive watch. Nothing that flagged him as anything other than exactly what he claimed to be. He shook her hand and said, "Sophia, I've heard good things." She said, "From who?" He smiled just slightly. "Marco mentioned you keep the whole operation running. Said if I had questions, you were the person to ask." Marco was the owner. He was a nervous, sweaty little man who had inherited the restaurant from his uncle and had been slightly overwhelmed by it ever since. He was not the kind of person who said complimentary things about employees unless he was trying to get something. Sophia filed that detail away and went back to work. Within 3 days, she started noticing things. The first thing she noticed was that Adrian was impossibly good at reading a room. Not in the way that experienced bartenders learn to be the careful attention to body language, the instinct for which customer needed a refill and which one needed to be cut off. That kind of skill took years, and it looked like skill. It had edges on it. What Adrian had was different. It was something older and quieter. When a group of loud men came in on his second night, and one of them started getting aggressive with a female server, Adrian did not raise his voice. He did not issue a warning. He simply walked to the end of the bar, stood still, and looked at the man. That was all. The man stopped mid-sentence. He looked at Adrian. Something shifted in his face. A sudden animal awareness, and he sat down, straightened his collar, and became completely reasonable for the rest of the night. Sophia watched the whole thing from 6 feet away and felt a chill move through her that she could not entirely explain. She told herself it was just the kind of presence some men had naturally. She told herself it meant nothing. The second thing she noticed was the way certain customers treated him. Not the regulars. Not the everyday crowd that filled the tables on weeknights. She meant the other ones. The men who came in wearing suits that cost more than her monthly rent, who sat at corner tables with their backs to walls and their eyes on doors. Those men, when they spotted Adrian behind the bar, changed. It was subtle. It would have been invisible to anyone not paying close attention. But Sophia paid close attention to everything. They sat straighter. Their conversations dropped lower. When Adrian brought them their drinks personally, something he did for certain customers and not others, she noticed they thanked him with a gravity that had nothing to do with cocktail service. One man on a Thursday night reached out and gripped Adrian's forearm when he set down the glass. He did not say anything. Adrian held the man's eyes for a moment, gave a single nod, and moved away. The man sat back as if a verdict had just been delivered in his favor. Sophia told herself she was reading too much into it. She told herself a lot of things that month. The third thing she noticed was harder to dismiss. She was closing one Saturday night. Adrian was helping her the way he had started doing without anyone asking him to, and she dropped a glass behind the bar. It shattered on the floor, and she reached down to pick up the pieces before she thought about it. She cut her finger. Not badly. A small, clean cut on her index finger that immediately began bleeding. She cursed under her breath and reached for a paper towel. Before she touched the dispenser, Adrian was already there. Not rushing, not making a big performance of it. Just there. He had a clean cloth in his hand, and he pressed it gently against her finger with a steadiness that made her notice his hands again. They were careful hands, she thought. Hands that understood exactly how much pressure was enough and how much was too much. "It's not deep," he said. He was not asking her. He was telling her in the tone of a man who had spent considerable time assessing injuries and understood the difference between something serious and something manageable. "I know," she said. "I've cut myself worse opening a wine bottle." "I don't doubt it." She looked up at him. He was already looking at her, not with the evaluating look that men sometimes gave her, the kind that moved over her face, like they were trying to decide if she was worth the effort. He was looking at her the way she imagined someone might look at a person they were genuinely glad existed. It was a small thing. She felt it all the way down to the place in her chest she had spent 4 years keeping locked. She pulled her hand back. "Thank you," she said, and made herself go back to sweeping up the glass. They started talking after that. Not about anything important at first. Small conversation, the kind that fills the empty space between tasks during a late-night closing shift. She learned that he had grown up in the city, that he had spent some years away, that he had no opinion on modern pop music, but a surprisingly detailed knowledge of jazz from the 1950s and 60s. She told him small things in return. Her neighborhood. The way New York in autumn made her think of her mother who had died when Sophia was 16. The fact that she had always wanted to learn how to bake properly, but had never made the time. He listened. That was the thing about Adrian that undid her more than anything else. He listened the way very few people she had ever met knew how to listen, not waiting for his turn to speak, not constructing his response while she was still talking, but actually hearing what she said and holding it with a kind of attention that felt like respect. When she finished speaking, he did not immediately fill the silence. He let it sit for a moment, the way a thoughtful person does when they are actually thinking about what they just heard. Then he responded, and what he said always proved that he had been paying attention. Sophia had not been listened to like that in years. She told herself it was not a significant thing. She told herself that too. 3 weeks into October. Marco called her into his office. She sat across from the cluttered desk that was always covered in invoices and delivery receipts and waited for him to say whatever nervous thing he was going to say. "I wanted to ask about Adrian," he started. "What about him? You've been working with him. You're good at reading people." Marco was sweating slightly, which was not unusual for Marco, but there was a quality to it tonight that felt different. I wanted your honest opinion. Does he seem like someone who is what he says he is? Sophia held very still. He's a good bartender, she said carefully. He shows up on time. Customers like him. That's not what I asked. She looked at her boss. Marco Benedetti was not a complicated man. He was nervous and slightly incompetent, and he had a tendency to overcharge for house wine. He was not the kind of man who asked careful questions. Why are you asking? She said. Marco looked at the door, then back at her. I just want to make sure we're all comfortable here. That everything is, normal. He said the word normal the way a person says it when they are not at all sure that normal is what they have. Sophia drove home that night thinking about Adrian's hands, about the way the suited man had looked at him on Thursday, about the quality of stillness that surrounded him in a conflict. She told herself there was a reasonable explanation. She told herself she would stop noticing things that were not her business. She almost believed it. 4 weeks after Adrian started at Carmine's, Sophia's life cracked open in a way she had not expected. It was a slow Tuesday night 40 minutes before closing, and the restaurant was down to 2 tables. Adrian was wiping down the bar, and Sophia was counting the register when the door opened. She heard it first, not the sound of the door, but the sound of the restaurant changing. A sudden collective stillness that moved through the remaining customers like a current. She looked up. 2 men had come in. They were not regulars. They were not the kind of men who came to a small family restaurant for dinner. They wore dark clothes, and they had the compact, deliberate physicality of men who had spent a long time in situations where being ready for something was the baseline condition. They did not look at the host stand. They did not look at the menu boards. They looked straight at the bar. Sophia kept her face neutral and her hands still on the register. Tell me he's here, the taller one said. He was talking to her. Who are you looking for? She said. Don't be cute. He put both hands flat on the bar and leaned forward. We know he's working here. Tell us where he is. I think you might have the wrong... He's here. The voice came from behind her. Sophia turned. Adrian had stepped out from the back room. He was still holding the cloth he had been using to wipe down the speed rail, but he had stopped moving. He was standing in the doorway with the same contained stillness he always carried, but something about it was different now. Something had come into it that had not been there before. She could not name it immediately. Later she would understand that what she was seeing was authority so deep and so genuine that it had no need to perform itself. I was wondering when you'd show up, Adrian said. His voice was exactly as calm as it always was. Vito send you. The taller man's jaw tightened. This is not the place for this conversation. You made it the place when you walked through that door. Adrian set the cloth down on the bar very deliberately. You have about 30 seconds to make a decision about how this goes. The shorter man reached into his jacket. Adrian said, Don't. Just the one word. The man's hand stopped. Sophia was not breathing. The taller man looked at his partner, then back at Adrian. Something moved behind his eyes, a calculation, a reconsideration. The kind of rethinking that happened when someone realized they had misread a situation in a way that could cost them considerably. We'll be in touch, the taller man said. I know you will, Adrian said. They left. The door swung shut behind them. The silence in the restaurant lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the 2 remaining tables returned to their conversations, their food, their ordinary Tuesday nights with the kind of deliberate normalcy that people adopt when they have witnessed something they do not want to have witnessed. Sophia turned to Adrian. He was already looking at her. He picked up the cloth and went back to cleaning the bar. Lock the door early tonight, he said. Tell Marco it was slow. Who were those men? She said. Nobody important. They were looking for you by name. He stopped moving. He looked at her across the bar, and for just a moment, just one, she saw something shift behind his eyes. Not deception, not dismissal. Something that looked almost like regret. Go home safe, Sophia, he said. That was all. She did not sleep that night. She lay on her side in the dark and turned the pieces over and over arranging them the way she had arranged the fragments of her father's situation years ago, trying to make the shape of the thing clear before the thing finished forming itself. A man who controlled rooms with silence. A boss who was nervous in his own restaurant. Suited men who treated a bartender like a superior. Two men who walked into a public place looking for him like they had the right to. One word that stopped a reaching hand. She had been here before, not exactly here, but in this neighborhood of feeling. The place where everything still looked ordinary on the surface, and something underneath was already changed forever. Her father had lived in that place for 6 months before Daniel Reyes finished destroying him. She had lived there herself when she was 23, during the weeks after the legal notices arrived and before she understood that no one was going to fix it for her. She knew what it felt like to be standing at the edge of a truth she did not yet have the words for. She lay in the dark, and she waited for the words. In the morning, she went back to work. Adrian was already behind the bar when she arrived. He had made coffee the good kind, not the restaurant supply batch that Marco bought in bulk, but the real kind from the place 2 blocks east that Sophia had mentioned once in a passing conversation 3 weeks ago. He set a cup in front of her without saying anything about it. She sat on the stool across from him and wrapped both hands around the cup. "You remembered," she said. "You mentioned it." "I mentioned it once." He looked at her steadily. "I remember things people tell me." She studied him over the rim of the cup. In the morning light, without the noise of a full restaurant around him, he looked different. Not softer exactly, but more present somehow, like the space of an ordinary morning allowed a version of him to exist that the performance of evening concealed. She thought about how much she had liked him. She thought about how much she still liked him. She thought about how those two things together constituted a problem she was not sure how to approach. "Last night," she said. "Last night was handled. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now." She set the cup down. "Adrian, I need you to know something." She kept her voice even. She was good at that, had gotten very good at it over the years, at delivering difficult things in a voice that gave nothing away about the cost of delivering them. "I spent 4 years watching someone I trusted be someone they were not. I watched it happen slowly all at once and every way in between. I know what it looks like when a person is keeping something back." He was quiet. "I'm not going to pressure you," she said. "I'm not going to make demands. That's not who I am. But I need you to know that I see you, and I'm not going to pretend I don't." The restaurant was still empty. The morning light came in at a low, pale angle. Somewhere in the kitchen a radio was playing something soft and indistinct. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You deserve better than a person who lies to you." "Yes," she said. "I do." "Then give me time to be honest with you in a way that doesn't put you in danger." She felt the air leave her lungs slowly. Not because the words frightened her, because they confirmed everything she had already understood. And because the way he said them, the raw, careful truth in them. The cost she could hear underneath made her realize that the man sitting across from her was carrying something enormous. That he had been carrying it alone, and that some part of her, some stubborn, inconvenient, deeply human part of her, wanted to be the person he finally set it down in front of. She picked up the coffee cup. "You've got until the end of the week," she said. He nodded once. She made herself stand up, walk to the back room, hang up her jacket, and go back to work. She did not look at him again for the next 20 minutes. She did not trust herself to. The week did not give Adrian until the end. It gave him until Thursday. Thursday night Carmine's was full. A private event in the back room, a birthday party for a family of 30 that spilled into the main dining area. Sophia was running between the bar and the tables. Adrian was handling the full service, and the noise level had built to the comfortable, warm chaos of a party well underway. She was behind the bar making a round of drinks when she felt it. The shift. It moved through the room the same way it had on Tuesday, but bigger this time, not a current, more like a pressure change. The kind of atmospheric drop that comes before a serious storm. She looked up. He was standing near the front door, a man in his late 50s, heavy-set in a charcoal suit that was expensive in the specific understated way that announced money without trying to. He had two men flanking him, both of whom wore their suits the same way. Soldiers wear uniforms like the clothing was armor, and they knew it. The room had not gone quiet. It had gone careful. The birthday party kept making noise, kept laughing, kept existing. But every other person in the restaurant, the regulars, the staff, the couple at the corner table had registered the arrival on some level below conscious thought and adjusted accordingly. Sophia set down the cocktail shaker. The man in the charcoal suit was looking around the room. His eyes found Adrian, and something happened to his face. Not surprise, not aggression. Something more complex. The expression of a man who has been waiting a long time for a meeting he was not sure he would get. He walked to the bar. He sat down. He did not look at Sophia. He looked at Adrian and said in a voice low enough that only the three of them could hear, "You've been quiet a long time." "I had things to take care of," Adrian said. "There are people who are wondering where your head is." "My head is where it has always been." The man in the suit glanced at Sophia. It was not the look of a man assessing a woman. It was the look of a man noticing a variable in an equation he was trying to solve. Sophia met his eyes. She did not look away. He turned back to Adrian. "She know who she's working with." "This is not the conversation we're having tonight, Sal," Adrian said. The man Sal settled back slightly. He picked up the menu that was sitting on the bar in front of him and turned it over in his hands without looking at it. "There's talk. You know there's talk. There's always talk. This kind is different." Sal set the menu down. "Vito is making moves. He's not being quiet about it. He's sending a message." "I heard his message." "And?" Adrian looked at Sal with the same steady, unreadable calm that Sophia had watched stop a reaching hand 2 nights before. "Tell him I got it," Adrian said. "Tell him I'll respond in my own time in my own way." Sal studied him for a long moment. Then he did something Sophia had not expected. He nodded. Not the nod of a superior acknowledging a subordinate. The nod of a man receiving a verdict. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Sophia once more, a brief appraising look that was not unfriendly but was very serious. Then he walked out. His 2 men followed without a word. Sophia waited until the door closed. She turned to Adrian. He was already looking at her. "Time's up," she said quietly. He did not argue. He said, "Saturday, after close. Give me Saturday." She held his eyes for 3 full seconds. "Saturday," she said, and went back to making drinks. But her hands, for the first time in 4 years, were not entirely steady. Because she understood now, with the particular certainty that comes not from evidence, but from knowing the bone-deep, wordless knowing of a person who has been here before, that whatever Adrian told her on Saturday was going to change everything. And that she was already, in spite of every instinct, in spite of every lesson she had earned the hard way, in spite of every wall she had spent years building, already afraid of losing him. Already. Before she even knew who he was. Saturday came the way difficult things always come, too fast and not fast enough at the same time. Sophia spent the whole shift pretending she was not waiting. She made drinks and took orders and smiled at customers and refilled coffee and did every ordinary thing that the job required, and underneath all of it, there was a clock running that had nothing to do with the hours on the wall. Adrian worked beside her the way he always did. Steady, unhurried, present. But something was different tonight, and she could feel it the way you feel. A change in weather before it arrives in the quality of the air around him, in the slight tension that lived in his shoulders, and would not fully release in the way his eyes moved across the room with a frequency and a precision that had nothing to do with bartending. He was watching the doors. She noticed that at 9 o'clock, and she did not say anything. She noticed that the 2 men who had come in on Tuesday were not back. She noticed that Sal had not returned. She noticed that Marco had called in sick for the 3rd time this week, which Marco never did, because Marco was the kind of man who showed up out of obligation even when he was miserable. She noticed all of it and said nothing and kept working. At 11:45, the last customer paid his tab and walked out into the cold October night. Sophia locked the front door. She stood with her back to it for a moment, her hand still on the deadbolt, and took one breath that she allowed herself to feel completely. Then she turned around. Adrian was behind the bar. He had 2 glasses in front of him, not cocktails, not wine. Whiskey. Neat. The good bottle from the top shelf that they only brought out when someone ordered it specifically. He had poured for both of them. She walked to the bar and sat down on the customer side for the first time in the 4 weeks she had known him. She wrapped her hands around the glass and looked at him across the polished wood and said, "Okay." He looked at her. "Okay," he said back. And then he started talking. He did not start at the beginning. He started in the middle the way people do when they have been carrying something so long that the beginning no longer feels like the relevant part. "My father's name was Dominic Moretti," he said. "He built something that lasted 40 years, a network, an organization, the kind that operates in the spaces between legitimate systems and fills the needs that legitimate systems pretend don't exist." He paused. He looked at the glass in front of him without drinking from it. "He was not a good man. He was a powerful man. There is a difference, and I spent a long time learning to understand it." Sophia said nothing. "When I was 12, Adrian continued, I watched my father end a business disagreement in a way that should have been handled with a conversation. I watched what happened when power decided it did not need to explain itself. He finally picked up the glass. He did not drink. He just held it. That was the first time I understood that the world I was being raised into had a price. I just did not know yet that I was the one who was going to spend his life paying it." "How old were you when he died?" Sophia asked. 26. "And you inherited it?" "I inherited everything," he said. "The legitimate businesses, the properties, the accounts, and the other things, the agreements, the debts, the alliances." He set the glass down. "The enemies." She looked at him steadily. "How many people answer to you?" He met her eyes. "Enough that it matters." "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It's not." He was quiet for a moment. "Hundreds of people directly and indirectly have their livelihoods connected to what my family built. Families. People who did not choose this world any more than I did, but who are in it now and who need someone at the top who is not going to burn everything down." Sophia turned the glass in her hands. "The men on Tuesday. Sent by a man named Vito Caruso. He runs a competing organization. He has been waiting for the right moment to expand his territory, and he thinks—" Adrian paused. "He thinks I am the weak point. He thinks that 12 months of me trying to restructure things, move operations into legitimate businesses, cut ties with the parts of the organization that I want no part of, he thinks that looks like a man losing his grip." "Is it?" Adrian looked at her with something that was almost the beginning of a smile. "It looks like whatever story someone decides to tell about it. That's the thing about power. The narrative matters almost as much as the reality." She absorbed that. "Sal, the man on Thursday. Salvatore De Campo. He was my father's consigliere. He's been loyal for 30 years. He met her eyes. He came to warn me. Vito is escalating. He is not sending polite messages anymore. And you. And me. What are you going to do?" "Handle it," he said. "The way I handle everything. Without becoming the thing my father was." Sophia set her glass down. She stood up from the stool. She walked around the bar and stood 2 feet from him, and she looked at him the way she had been wanting to look at him for 4 weeks without the buffer of customer space between them, without the performance of professional distance, just directly and completely. "Adrian Moretti," she said. "Boss of what exactly?" "The Moretti family," he said. "One of the oldest organized crime families operating in the northeastern United States." The words sat in the air between them. She heard them. She felt the weight of them. And then she said the thing that surprised both of them. "How long were you going to let me work next to you before you told me?" His jaw tightened slightly. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From exactly what you're feeling right now." She shook her head. "Not in anger. In something more complicated than anger." "The problem with that logic," she said, "is that you don't get to decide what I can handle. You don't know what I've already survived." He looked at her. "Tell me," he said. And he meant it. So she did. She told him about her father and Daniel Reyes. She told him the way she had never told anyone else, not the sanitized version she gave new acquaintances, not the angry version she had carried for the first 2 years. The real version. The one that still had texture to it. She told him about the 31 years her family had built into that restaurant, and the single afternoon it took to lose it. She told him about the legal notices and her father's face when he understood that his closest friend had been building a trap around him for years. She told him about driving from the city 3 times a week after the transfer went through, sitting across from her father at the kitchen table of a house that now felt too big and too quiet, trying to find something encouraging to say to a man who was quietly disappearing. She told him her father died 14 months after the restaurant was taken. His heart. The doctors said his heart. Sophia had always believed it was something else entirely. Adrian listened. He did not touch her. He did not offer comfort at the wrong moments, the way people who are not actually listening always do. He heard every word, and he kept his eyes on her, and he let the story be exactly as heavy as it was. When she finished, neither of them spoke for almost a full minute. Then he said, "I'm sorry." Not the reflexive sorry of someone filling a silence. The sorry of a person who understood loss at a molecular level and recognized it in someone else. He trusted the wrong person, Sophia said. That's what killed him. Not the restaurant, not the money. He trusted someone completely, and that person used that trust as a weapon, and my father never recovered from finding out that something like that was possible. It changes you, Adrian said quietly. When someone uses your trust against you, it doesn't just hurt. It makes you question every judgment you've ever made. She looked at him. You're speaking from experience. The man who was supposed to take over operations when my father got sick, he said. His name was Caruso, Vito Caruso's brother. He was positioned inside our organization for 3 years before my father's decline. When my father died, he made his move. Adrian was very still. He killed 2 of our people. He stole assets. He used information my father had trusted him with to try to dismantle everything from the inside. Sophia felt the parallel land. She felt it the way you feel something that has always been true, suddenly arriving in your body. So you understand, she said. I understand why you hate betrayal the way you do, he said. Because it is not just about the damage. It is about what it reveals. That the person you trusted was capable of that. That you did not see it. He paused. That is the part that never fully heals. She looked at him across the 12 inches of space between them, and something happened to her chest that she had not given anything permission to do in 4 years. She stepped back. She needed the distance. I need to think, she said. He nodded. I know. I'm not running, she said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not the person who runs without a conversation. But I need... She stopped. I need time to figure out what I'm supposed to do with this. What you are supposed to do, he said, is whatever you decide is right for you, not for me, not for anyone else. She looked at him one more time. Then she picked up her jacket and her bag, and she walked to the door, and she let herself out into the October night without looking back. Because if she looked back, she would not leave. And she was not yet sure that staying was the right thing. She spent Sunday not thinking about him. She was spectacularly unsuccessful. She cleaned her apartment. She did 2 loads of laundry. She called her cousin Renata in Miami and talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular, listening to Renata's children, making noise in the background, and feeling the specific ache of a life that was genuinely full versus the one she was currently living. She did not say anything about Adrian. She was not ready to put words to it for someone else yet. After she hung up, she sat on her couch in the particular silence of a New York City apartment on a Sunday afternoon, and she had an honest conversation with herself. She had feelings for a man who ran a mafia family. That was the sentence. She turned it over and looked at all its sides, the way you look at something you found on the ground and are not sure whether to pick up. The feelings were real. That was not the question. The question was what the feelings were built on. She thought about the man who had sat across from her for 4 weeks, making her coffee, remembering details she mentioned once in passing, listening with the full weight of his attention, stopping a dangerous situation with a single word. She thought about the way he had pressed a cloth against her cut finger, with hands that knew exactly how much pressure was enough. She thought about what he had said. Not just the words, but the way he had said them, the cost visible in every sentence, the genuine difficulty of a man who had spent his entire life in a world he had not chosen and was fighting every single day not to be consumed by it. She thought about her father who had trusted too easily and paid everything. She thought about herself, and she thought knowing the truth is not the same thing as knowing too much. Her father had not known. He had been kept in the dark, managed, manipulated. Sophia knew. Adrian had told her. He had sat across from her in an empty restaurant and said the real thing, cost and all, without softening it into something easier to swallow. That was different. That was its own kind of respect. She sat with that for a long time. Then she went to bed without reaching a conclusion, which was itself, she knew, a kind of conclusion. She was back at work on Monday. Adrian was already there. He was doing the morning inventory, moving through the back shelves with a clipboard and a pen. And he looked up when she walked in, and their eyes met across the room, and neither of them said anything for a moment. Then she said, "Good morning." He said, "Good morning." And then after a beat, "How are you?" "I'm still figuring that out," she said honestly. He nodded once like that was a reasonable answer, which she appreciated, and went back to the inventory. She hung up her jacket and put on her apron and started the coffee, and they worked side by side in the ordinary quiet of a Monday morning setup, and nothing was resolved, and nothing was decided, and somehow that was all right. That was the beginning of something that she did not have a name for yet. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, not the clean arrived thing, just the decision to stay in the same room with the question a little longer. The week that followed was the strangest of her life. She went to work every day knowing what she knew. She stood behind the bar next to a man who ran an empire, and she watched him make drinks and listen to customers and remember small details about people's lives, and she kept waiting for the dissonance to become unbearable. It did not. That was what confused her. Because knowing the truth about Adrian did not make him different. It made him make more sense. All the things she had noticed, the authority, the stillness, the way rooms responded to his presence. They were no longer strange anomalies she was trying to explain. They were simply the visible surface of something much larger and much older. He was the same man. He had always been the same man. She just knew more of him now. On Wednesday, a woman came into the restaurant in the early afternoon and sat at the bar. She was in her 40s, well-dressed, and her face had the particular tightness of someone who had been frightened for a long time. She ordered water. She did not look at the menu. Sophia brought the water and said, "Can I get you something to eat?" The woman shook her head. "I'm waiting for someone." Then she looked at Adrian, who was at the far end of the bar, and she said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Is that him, Moretti?" Sophia kept her face completely neutral. "Can I ask what this is about?" The woman's hands tightened around the water glass. "My husband worked for a man named Vito Caruso. He tried to leave. They won't let him leave." She blinked. Her eyes were very dry, the way eyes get when a person has decided they cannot afford to cry anymore. "Someone told me that Moretti is different, that he doesn't, that he helps people who are caught in the middle." Sophia looked at the woman. She looked at Adrian. He had heard. She could tell from the slight change in his posture, nothing anyone else would notice, but she noticed. He walked to the center of the bar. He said to the woman calmly and without any ceremony, "Tell me your husband's name." The woman looked at him. Whatever she had expected, whatever she had steeled herself to face, it was not this quiet man with a dish towel over his shoulder looking at her like she mattered. She told him. Adrian said, "Write down your number." He pushed a napkin across the bar. "I'll be in touch." The woman wrote it down with a hand that shook slightly. She stood up. She said, "Thank you." And then, because it was clearly important to her that he understand, "He's a good man. He just made a wrong choice when he was young, and he has been paying for it ever since." Adrian met her eyes. That's a story I know something about. She left. Sophia waited until the door closed. Does that happen often? She asked. More than you'd think, he said. She picked up a glass and started polishing it. Do you always help? He thought about it for a moment. The real kind of thinking, not the kind that produces a ready answer. When I can, he said. When the help won't create a worse problem for them on the other end. He paused. There are things I can do because of what I am that other people cannot do. It would be a waste not to use that when someone genuinely needs it. She set the glass down. That is not the answer I expected from a mafia boss, she said. He looked at her. I'm not trying to be what you expected, he said. She held his gaze for a moment too long. Then she picked up another glass. Good, she said. Keep it that way. Thursday night, Vito Caruso's people came back. Not the two men from Tuesday. Different men this time. 3 of them. They arrived 20 minutes before closing, took a table near the back, and ordered drinks they did not touch. Sophia knew within 60 seconds of their arrival. She could feel it, the same pressure, the same shift. She had started to recognize it the way you recognize the sound of your own building's elevator, something specific and familiar and impossible to mistake. She moved behind the bar to where Adrian was standing and said low and even, 3 men, back left table. They've been watching you since they sat down. He did not look immediately. He finished what he was doing, set it down, picked up a towel. Then he looked. He said nothing for a moment. Then, go to the back room and stay there until I come and get you. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Sophia. I said I'm not going anywhere. He turned to look at her. His eyes were very serious and very close. These are not the kind of men who... I know what kind of men they are, she said. And I'm telling you that I am not going to the back room and leaving you out here alone. So either figure out a plan that includes me, or accept that I'm standing right here. Something moved through his expression, something layered and quick that she caught only the edge of. Stay behind the bar, he said. Do not engage with them directly. Fine, she said. I mean it. I heard you. He held her eyes for one more second. Then he moved. He walked around the bar and straight to the back table, the way a man walks towards something he has already decided about. He sat down across from the 3 men without being invited. Sophia watched from behind the bar with her hands flat on the surface. She could not hear the conversation from where she stood. She could see the body language, the initial rigidity of the 3 men. The way one of them leaned forward in what was clearly an aggressive posture. The way Adrian sat back and said something that made the leaning man stop and reconsider. She watched Adrian reach into his jacket slowly, deliberately, with a composure that was clearly intended to signal that the movement was not a threat, and place a phone on the table between them. He said something. The man who had been leaning forward looked at the phone. He picked it up. He read whatever was on the screen. Something changed in his face. He showed the screen to the other 2. They read it. The energy at the table, which had been tightly coiled, pointed, dangerous, began to slowly deflate. Not completely, not into friendliness, but into a kind of reluctant acknowledgement. The man who had been leaning forward handed the phone back to Adrian. He said something short. Adrian nodded once. He stood up. He walked back to the bar. He picked up the towel he had set down. They'll be leaving in 5 minutes, he said. She stared at him. What was on the phone? A message from someone they respect more than Vito. He resumed wiping down the bar as if the last 8 minutes had not happened. Someone who has decided that Vito's current approach is creating problems for everyone. You set that up, she said. You've been working on this all week. He looked at her. I told you I would handle it, he said. I keep my word, Sophia. She looked at him for a long time. The 3 men at the back table stood up. They paid their check. They actually paid. She noticed correct amount, plus a reasonable tip, and they walked out. The door closed behind them. The restaurant was quiet. Sophia let out a breath she had been holding so long she had lost track of it. That is a deeply insane way to live, she said. Yes, he said. Every day. Not every day. Some days are just coffee and inventory. She laughed. She had not meant to. It came out before she could decide about it, a short, genuine, involuntary laugh that surprised her as much as it surprised him. He looked at her with something in his eyes that she recognized because she had felt it in herself. The specific warmth of being the reason someone laughed when they had not expected to. "You should do that more," he said. "What?" "That. What you just did." She felt the flush move up the back of her neck and made a decision not to address it. "Don't push it, Moretti," she said. He smiled. The real one, the one she had only seen twice before, the one that took years off his face and made him look for just a moment like a man who had figured out how to put something heavy down. She turned away from it. Because she was in serious trouble. She had known it since Sunday, probably. But standing in the quiet of the emptied restaurant, watching him smile at something she had done without thinking, she understood it fully for the first time. She was not just interested in Adrian Moretti. She was not just grateful for his honesty. She was falling, clean and complete, and without any of the usual resistance she could usually muster. She was falling toward a man whose name made rooms go quiet, whose past was written in shadows, whose present was a daily negotiation between the world he had inherited and the man he was fighting to become. And the terrifying thing, the thing she turned over in her hands all the way home that night, was that the falling did not feel like a mistake. It felt like the most honest thing that had happened to her in years. Friday morning, she arrived at Carmine's to find a single cup of coffee waiting for her on the bar. The good kind. From the place 2 blocks east. Adrian was in the back running the delivery check. He had not seen her come in. He had not known exactly when she would arrive. He had made the coffee anyway. Left it where she would find it. At the temperature, she preferred she had mentioned it once the way she liked it. Not scalding, but genuinely hot, the kind that held its heat for 20 minutes. She stood at the bar and looked at the cup. She thought about her father trusting the wrong person. She thought about what that cost. She thought about what it would cost to not trust the right one. She picked up the coffee. She wrapped both hands around it the way she always did. She took the first sip. And she made a quiet, private, deeply consequential decision. She was going to stop running from this. She was going to stay in the room with it. Not because it was safe. It was not safe. She knew that. But because safe had not been serving her for 4 years. Safe had been a room she'd built around herself after Daniel Reyes. A room with no doors. And she had told herself it was a home, when really it was just a place where nothing could reach her, including anything worth having. Adrian came in from the back. He stopped when he saw her. He looked at the cup in her hands and back at her face, and he did not say anything. She said, "Thank you for the coffee." "Of course," he said. She looked at him across the bar. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "In case you were wondering." Something moved through his face, slow and careful and real. "Okay," he said. "Just that. Just okay." But the way he said it, the specific weight it carried, the thing beneath it that she could hear, but that he did not try to put into words, told her everything she needed to know. She nodded. She took another sip of coffee. And they went back to work. But the room between them had changed. Both of them felt it. Neither of them said so. Because some things are too new and too true to survive being spoken aloud before they are ready. And both of them had learned in their different and parallel ways that the things worth having were always worth the wait. The decision Sophia made on Friday morning lasted 11 days. 11 days of coffee left on the bar. 11 days of closing shifts that ran long, not because the work required it, but because neither of them was in any particular hurry for the night to end. 11 days of conversations that moved through the hours. The way good conversations do, not toward a destination, but deeper into a place that felt increasingly like somewhere she wanted to stay. She learned things about him in pieces. She learned that he had not slept more than 5 consecutive hours in years, not because he could not, but because the quietest part of the night was when his mind did its most honest accounting, running through every decision, every choice, every consequence he had either prevented or failed to prevent. She learned that he had put 3 of his father's former associates' children through college anonymously, because those men had died in service to a world none of them had chosen, and their children deserved a different one. She learned that he kept a photograph in his wallet, not of a person, but of the restaurant his grandfather had opened in 1962. The original Moretti business, the one his father had shuttered when the money from darker operations made it seem unnecessary. He thought he was building up, Adrian told her one night. He thought taking everything bigger, faster, stronger was the same thing as building something real. He paused. He was wrong about that his entire life, and he never knew it. "Do you think he would have changed?" she asked. If he'd lived longer. Adrian was quiet for a moment. The honest kind of quiet. "No," he said finally. "I don't. Because changing requires you to believe something different is possible. My father only believed in one kind of power. He couldn't imagine another." "And you," she said. "What do you believe is possible?" He looked at her across the bar. "I'm looking at it," he said. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second longer than she meant to. Then she looked away and said something about the inventory, and they went back to work, and neither of them addressed what he had just said directly. But she carried it home. She carried it the way you carry something fragile, carefully, both hands, full attention. The 11th day ended at midnight on a Wednesday, and it ended because of a phone call. Adrian took it in this back room. She heard his voice change, not in volume, not even in tone exactly, but in the quality beneath the tone, the way a structure changes before you can see the damage on the surface. She kept working. She gave him the privacy of it. He came back out 7 minutes later. She looked at his face and felt everything in her go still. "What happened?" she said. "Nothing yet," he said. The word yet carried the weight of everything he was not saying. "Adrian." He looked at her directly. "Vito is moving faster than I expected. He's not waiting for the political situation to resolve itself. He's making a statement." He paused. "There's going to be a meeting. Tomorrow. People who need to understand that the Moretti organization is not in a state of weakness, regardless of appearances." "A meeting," she said. "What kind of meeting?" "The kind I don't take you to," he said. She put down what was in her hands. "Is it dangerous?" "Most things in my life carry some level of danger." "That is not what I asked." He met her eyes. "Yes," he said. "It carries risk. Not to me directly. The people in that room understand the consequences of certain kinds of choices. But—" He stopped. "But what?" "But Vito is unpredictable in a way his brother was not. His brother was cruel, but he was organized. Vito is both of those things, and he is also unstable, which makes him something else entirely." Sophia absorbed that. "When did he become the main problem?" "When I started dismantling the things that were keeping him in a subordinate position," Adrian said. "Every operation I shut down, every connection I cut, every step I took toward making this organization something I'm not ashamed of. Vito read all of it as weakness. He doesn't understand that it's the opposite." His jaw tightened. "He's about to find out." She looked at him for a long moment. "Come back in one piece," she said. Something moved through his expression. "That's the plan." "I mean it, Adrian." "I know you do." He held her eyes. "I know exactly what it would cost you if something happened. I am not going to let that happen." She should have let it go at that. She should have nodded and moved on, and given him the space to be the version of himself that handled things she was not part of. Instead, she said, "What it would cost me. You said that like you know." "I do know." "How?" I was quiet for a beat. Then, "Because I know what it would cost me if something happened to you. And I think what I feel when I think about that is probably not entirely different from what you'd feel." He paused. "I could be wrong." She stared at him. "You're not wrong," she said. She turned and walked to the other end of the bar before either of them could say anything else, and she worked the rest of the closing shift in a state that was neither happiness nor fear, but some complicated, real, deeply human mixture of both. He came back the next day. He walked through the back door of Carmine's at 2 in the afternoon, when the lunch rush was thinning, and Sophia was running on 3 hours of sleep and her 4th coffee, and she saw him, and the thing in her chest that had been clenched all night released so abruptly she had to set down what she was holding. "You're here," she said. "I said I would be." "How did it go?" He sat down at the bar. He looked like a man who had spent the last 18 hours in a room full of people who required constant management. Not beaten, not broken, just tired in the specific way of someone who has been the steadiest person in a difficult situation and has spent all his steadiness. "It went the way it needed to," he said. "Vito is not going to make a direct move right now. There are too many people in that room who made it clear that a direct move would be poorly received, and Vito accepted that. Vito doesn't have the resources right now to ignore it." He looked at her. "But Vito is the kind of man who does not let things go. He will wait. He will find another angle." He paused. "He's already looking for one." "What does that mean?" Adrian picked up the coffee she had wordlessly placed in front of him. He held it for a moment. "It means that for the next period of time, everything around me needs to be handled very carefully. The people I trust. The places I go." He looked up at her. "The people I care about." She understood immediately. "He knows about me," she said. It was not a question. Adrian set the coffee down. "Sal warned me this morning. Vito has been watching Carmine's. He knows you're here. He knows that I—" He stopped. He started again. "He knows that my presence here is not about the job." Sophia was quiet. "How much does he know?" she said. "Enough to think you're leverage." The word landed between them like something dropped. Leverage. She had been called many things in her life. She had been called difficult and independent and too much and not enough and stubborn and strong. She had never been called leverage. It made her feel something she had not expected. Not fear, though the fear was also present. Something more fundamental. Something that pulled at the deepest part of her, the part that had spent 4 years building walls. The part that had spent 31 years watching her family pour themselves into something only to have it used against them. "I'm not going to let him use you," Adrian said. "He can't use me if I don't let him," she said. Her voice was even. "I'm not afraid of men like Vito Caruso." "You should be afraid of men like Vito Caruso." "Maybe." She looked at Adrian directly. "But I'm more afraid of making decisions out of fear and losing something real because I ran when I should have stayed." He looked at her. He said quietly, "Sophia." "Don't," she said. "Don't tell me to leave. Don't make that decision for me." "I'm not trying to—" "You were about to." He stopped. She was right, and they both knew it. "Okay," he said. "Okay, then what do you want to do?" She thought about it. The real kind of thinking, not the immediate answer, but the one underneath it, the one that reflected what she actually believed. "I want you to stop keeping me at the edge of things," she said. "I want you to stop making decisions about how much I can handle. If this is what I think it is, then I need to actually be in it. Not managed. Not protected from the parts you think are too much. In it." Adrian was very still. "You understand what that means," he said. "I understand exactly what that means. It's not a small thing to ask someone to walk into. I know." She held his gaze. "But you already let me in further than you've let anyone in a long time. Both of us know that. So the question isn't whether I'm already in this. The question is whether you're going to stop pretending I'm not." The silence that followed was the longest of the entire month she had known him. Then he said, "No more pretending." She nodded. "No more pretending," she said. And that was the moment. Not the coffee on the bar, not the whiskey on Saturday night, not the almost things they had said to each other in the spaces between. That was the actual moment. Both of them felt it. Neither of them looked away. 3 days later, the world cracked open. It happened on a Saturday night, a busy one, the restaurant full, the noise level high and warm and ordinary. Sophia was working the bar, and Adrian was covering a section because one of the servers had called out sick, and everything was normal, completely normal, until it wasn't. She was making a cocktail when she heard the shift. She had gotten good at hearing it. The specific change in the air, the collective recalibration of a room that had registered something. She looked up before she consciously decided to. The man who had walked in was not Vito. She had never met Vito, but she knew instantly this was not him. This man was young, maybe 30, and he had the specific kind of energy that read not as power, but as someone performing proximity to power. Someone sent to deliver something, rather than someone with the authority to decide things himself. He walked to the bar. He sat down directly across from her. He said, "Tell Moretti that Vito wants to finish this conversation. Tonight." She said, "I don't know who you're talking about." He smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You know exactly who I'm talking about, and he knows exactly what this means." He slid something across the bar, a folded piece of paper. "Give him that." She did not reach for it. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked back out. She looked at the paper on the bar. She did not touch it for 30 seconds. Then she picked it up, went to the back room, and said, "Adrian." He turned. She handed him the paper. He unfolded it. He read it. His face did not change, not a single visible thing moved, and that complete absence of reaction was the most frightening thing she had ever seen on a human face, because it meant whatever he was reading was serious enough that he had made an instant decision not to show it. "What does it say?" she asked. He folded the paper. He put it in his pocket. "It says Vito wants a meeting at the Caruso warehouse on the south side. Midnight." He looked at her. "It also says..." He stopped. "Adrian. It also says that if I don't come alone, there will be consequences for the people I've been careless enough to let get close to me." The room went very quiet. Not the restaurant was still loud and full and completely ordinary. The quiet was internal, inside the specific space where the two of them were standing. "He's threatening me," she said. "He's threatening the idea of you. He doesn't know you specifically well enough to threaten you specifically." Adrian's voice was controlled, careful, but underneath the control she could hear something that she had never heard from him before, something that ran hotter than his usual steadiness. That is about to be the worst mistake of his life. "You can't go to that meeting," she said. "I have to. Adrian, if he's saying come alone and bringing a threat about people close to you, then he's staging something he thinks will work because he believes I've lost my edge." Adrian looked at her with eyes that were absolutely certain. "Hai is wrong about that." "How can you be certain?" "Because he thinks love makes a man weak," Adrian said. "And I know for a fact that it makes certain kinds of men considerably more dangerous." She stared at him. "You are not going alone," she said. "I am not taking you to..." "I did not say I was going. I said you are not going alone." She kept her voice steady. "Call Sal. Call whoever it is you call. But you are not walking into that warehouse at midnight by yourself, because Vito Caruso sent a message on a piece of paper." He looked at her for a moment. Something shifted in him. She watched it happen. The small internal adjustment of a man who had spent his whole life making unilateral decisions, beginning to understand in real time what it meant to have someone in his corner who was not there out of obligation or fear. "I'll call Sal," he said. "Good. Sophia." "Don't thank me," she said. "Just come back." He held her eyes. "I will," he said. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. After 4 years of trusting no one completely, she believed him without reservation, without calculation, without the careful internal auditing she applied to everything. She just believed him. And she did not know yet whether that was wisdom or the most dangerous thing she had ever done. He left at 11. She stayed at the restaurant after close, which Marco did not question, because Marco had stopped questioning most things that involved Adrian. She sat at the bar and drank water and tried to read something on her phone and failed completely. At 12:43, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she did not recognize. 3 words. "It's handled. Safe." She put the phone down on the bar. She put her hands flat next to it. She stared at the ceiling and breathed. At 1:15, the back door opened. She was off the stool before she finished the thought. Adrian walked in. He had a cut above his right eyebrow, not deep, not serious, but fresh enough that it had bled and been wiped and bled slightly again. His jacket was gone. His shirt had been through something. She crossed the room and stopped 18 inches from him. She looked at the cut. She looked at his eyes. She did a rapid assessment the way a person does when they have been waiting an hour and 40 minutes in a state of controlled terror. "Sit down," she said. I'm fine. Sit down. He sat on a bar stool. She went behind the bar and got the first aid kit that lived under the left end of the counter. She came back around and stood in front of him and opened the kit and did not say anything while she cleaned the cut with hands that were steadier than she had any right to. He let her. He sat there and let her take care of him without protest, without deflection, without the performance of being a man who did not need anything. He just sat and looked at her face while she worked with an expression that was quieter and more open than anything she had seen from him before. What happened? She asked. She was focused on the cut. Easier to have the conversation without full eye contact. Vito had more people there than the agreement allowed. He was planning to make a statement regardless of what I said. He paused. Sal had anticipated that possibility. So Sal had more people too. Sal is very good at his job. And Vito. Vito understood tonight that his calculation was wrong. He paused. He won't make a direct move again for a significant period of time. But he's not finished. No. Men like Vito are never finished. They just recalibrate. He watched her apply the small bandage over the cut. The question he's sitting with right now is whether I'm worth the cost. I need that calculation to stay expensive for him. She pressed the edge of the bandage down carefully. She did not move back. She was close enough that she could see the specific dark of his eyes from this distance, the tiredness in them, and underneath the tiredness, something that was neither calculation nor performance. Something that was just him. The real, unguarded, undivided version. Adrian, she said. Yeah. If you ever do something like that again without telling me more than you told me tonight. I know. I mean it. I know you mean it. He looked at her. I'm not used to having someone to tell. She held his gaze. Get used to it, she said. And for the third time since she had known him, she watched the real smile break across his face, unguarded, genuine, slightly disbelieving, like a man who keeps being surprised by his own luck. She stepped back. She put the first aid kit away. She poured 2 glasses of water and came back and set one in front of him and held the other. Tell me what really happened tonight, she said. Not the managed version, the real one. He looked at her. And he did. All of it. Every detail she had not been given before the full scope of Vito's play. The countermove Sal had staged the specific moment when the balance in the warehouse had shifted, and Adrian had made the choice not to respond to Vito's aggression with the kind of force that would have been simpler and faster and wrong. He told her about the moment Vito had looked at him across a warehouse full of armed men and said, "You've gone soft, Moretti. You've let a woman make you soft." And Adrian had said very quietly, "You have no idea what she's made me." Sophia listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did you mean when you said that to him?" He looked at her. "I meant," he said, "that before you I was maintaining something, managing an inheritance I never asked for, and trying not to let it destroy anything else. I was holding position." He paused. "You made me want to actually build something, not manage. Build. That is not the same thing, and it is not the thing a man does when he's going soft." His voice was very steady. "It's the thing a man does when he's finally decided what he's fighting for." The air between them held everything. She felt it, the weight of it, the realness, the particular vulnerability of a man who does not say things easily, saying something completely true. She felt the walls she had built at 23, the careful architecture of distance she had maintained for 4 years, take the specific kind of damage that cannot be repaired. She did not try to repair it. She said, "I didn't plan this." Neither did I. I had very good reasons not to let this happen. "I know," he said. "So did I. I'm still not entirely sure it's not going to be the most complicated thing I've ever done." "It will absolutely be the most complicated thing you've ever done," he said. "I can promise you that." She looked at him. Despite the warehouse, the cut above his eye, Vito Caruso and his recalibrating calculations, the life that came attached to this man. Like weather, she felt something that she recognized as a kind of clarity she had not had in a very time. She said, "I'm not built for simple anyway." He reached across the bar and took her hand. Not dramatically, not as a gesture, just took it. Covered her hand with his, the way a person reaches for something they are finally allowing themselves to have. She looked down at their hands. She looked up at him. And then the door burst open. 3 men she had never seen before moved through it with the specific urgency of people who had not stopped to knock, because stopping was not part of the calculation. Behind them, stumbling slightly, his face pale and his shirt untucked, was Marco. Marco, who had called in sick for 3 days. Marco, who had been nervous in his own restaurant since October. Marco, who was looking at Adrian right now with an expression that was equal parts shame and terror. The man in front said, "Mr. Moretti, there's been a development." Adrian stood. His hand released her. The version of him that had been sitting at the bar, open, tired, present, closed up with the efficiency of a man who had spent his entire life learning to seal himself on demand. He looked at Sophia once. "Stay here," he said. She looked at Marco. Marco could not meet her eyes, and in the cold, clear part of her mind that had been taking notes since October, the part that had watched and catalogued and filed away every anomaly, every warning sign, every detail that did not fit, something about Marco clicked into place, something that made her chest go cold. Because Marco had not been calling in sick. Marco had been somewhere. And the question she had not thought to ask until this exact moment was where. Marco could not look at her. That was the thing. Sophia kept coming back to in the 60 seconds that followed. Not the 3 men who had come through the door. Not Adrian's face, closing up like a fist. Not the particular quality of urgency that had entered the room and changed the temperature of everything. What she kept coming back to was Marco. Standing there in his untucked shirt, with his hands at his sides, unable to lift his eyes to hers. She had known Marco Benedetti for 2 years. She had watched him stress about invoices and overcharge for house wine, and call in favors with the health inspector, and apologize to angry customers with the specific sweaty desperation of a man who needed everyone to like him. She knew his tells. She knew when he was nervous about money, and when he was nervous about his ex-wife, and when he was nervous about nothing in particular. This was different. This was the nervousness of a man who had done something he could not undo, and was standing in the room where the consequences had just arrived. "Marco," she said. He flinched. Adrian said to the man in front, "Talk." The man, late 40s, compact, with the flat professional affect of someone who delivered bad news for a living, said, "Vito made a secondary move while the warehouse meeting was running. He had people on 2 of your legitimate operations. The East Side Property Management Company and the restaurant supply chain." He paused. "They hit both simultaneously, an hour ago." Adrian's expression did not change. "Damage. The property company is recoverable. The supply chain." The man paused again. "He got into the accounts, not all of them, but enough to send a message." "How did he know which accounts?" Adrian said. His voice was completely level. Too level. The man did not answer immediately. Adrian turned. He looked at Marco. Marco's shoulders caved inward like a building losing its frame. "Marco," Adrian said. Just the name, nothing else. And Marco broke. Not dramatically. Not with excuses or defenses, or the elaborate self-justifications that people usually construct when they have done something they cannot defend. He broke simply the way exhausted things break, with a kind of relief that was almost worse than the betrayal itself. "He came to me 3 weeks ago," Marco said. "Vito. He knew about the restaurant. He knew you were here. He said..." Marco's voice cracked. "He said if I didn't give him information, he would my daughter Moretti. He knows where my daughter lives. He knows her schedule. He described her building to me in detail to make sure I understood he was serious." Silence. "So you told him about the accounts?" Adrian said. "Not all of it. I told him as little as I could. I swear I gave him as little as I could." Marco finally looked up. His eyes were red. "I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't matter how little it was. I know what I did." Sophia looked at Marco and felt 2 things simultaneously. The cold, clear recognition of betrayal that she had learned to identify 4 years ago, and something more complicated underneath it. Something that acknowledged the specific, unbearable position of a man who was not fundamentally bad, but who had been handed a choice between two things he could not survive losing. Her father would have understood that position. Her father had spent 30 years trusting a man who was not under any pressure at all. Marco had been threatened with his child. She did not say any of that. This was not her moment to speak. Adrian looked at Marco for a long time. The kind of look that takes inventory, that separates what is true from what is performance. She watched him make a calculation that had nothing to do with mathematics and everything to do with the specific moral accounting of a man who was trying to lead something without becoming his father. "Your daughter," Adrian said finally. "Where is she right now?" Marco blinked. "Her apartment, Brooklyn. Call her. Tell her to pack a bag for a week and go to your sister's house in Connecticut tonight, right now." He looked at the man who had delivered the news. "Make sure she gets there without a problem." The man nodded and stepped out. Marco was staring at Adrian. Why are you?" "Because Vito threatened her to get to me," Adrian said. "That makes her my responsibility. Whatever you did, she didn't do anything." He paused. "Call her, now." Marco reached for his phone with shaking hands. Sophia watched him step away to make the call. She looked at Adrian. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," he said. Like it was obvious. Like there was no version of this moment in which he did not take care of the innocent person. She felt something move through her chest, slow and real, and completely uncomplicated. "The accounts," she said. "How bad is it? Manageable." He was already thinking 3 steps ahead. She could see it, the rapid internal architecture of a man rebuilding something in real time. "Vito's problem is that he keeps thinking in terms of damage. He's trying to hurt me. He doesn't understand that every move he makes in this direction costs him more credibility with the people who matter than it costs me in money. He's making it personal. He already made it personal." Adrian looked at her directly. "The moment he sent that message about the people I care about, he made it personal. And personal is where I'm strongest because I actually have something to fight for." He paused. "Vito is fighting for market share. I am not." Marco came back. His color was slightly better. "She's going tonight. She's okay." "Good," Adrian said. "Marco." He waited until Marco was looking at him fully. "You're going to stay in Connecticut with your daughter for the next 2 weeks. Don't come back to the city until I tell you it's clear." "The restaurant." "Sophia can run the restaurant." Adrian looked at her. "If she's willing." She looked back at him. "I've been running it anyway." The faintest trace of something warm moved through Adrian's expression and was gone. "You'll have what you need. Staff resources, whatever the restaurant requires." He looked back at Marco. "When this is finished, we'll talk about what comes next. Not tonight." Marco nodded. He looked like a man who had been given more grace than he believed he deserved and was not sure what to do with it. "I'm sorry, Moretti. I mean that." "I know you do," Adrian said. "Now go." Marco went. The 3 men followed, one of them peeling off to make a phone call, the others moving with the efficient purpose of people who had a list of tasks and were already mentally working through it. And then it was just the 2 of them again. The restaurant was empty and quiet. Sophia sat back down on the bar stool. She needed 10 seconds of stillness to let the last 20 minutes settle into something she could actually process. "Your whole life is like this," she said. Not accusatory, just true. "Yes," he said. "Crisis and response and crisis again." "Less than it used to be," he said. "More than I'd like." She looked at her hands. "When does it stop?" "When I finish what I started." He sat down across from her. "I have dismantled about 60% of what my father built that I consider indefensible. The rest takes time because it involves people who need transition plans, not just termination." He met her eyes. "I am not going to pretend to you that it's going to be simple or fast. It is not. But I am telling you that it is happening. Every day it is happening." She studied him. "Do you believe it's possible?" she asked. "Actually possible. Not as a goal, but as a thing that will actually happen." "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "Because I have been doing it. Not talking about it, not planning it, doing it. He paused. The people who say change is impossible are usually the people who have never actually committed to it. Not just thought about it, committed. Given up the things the old way provided. Accepted the cost. What has it cost you? I was quiet for a moment. Relationships, he said. People who were loyal to my father and saw my direction as a rejection of him. Money in the short term. Security, because the restructuring created gaps that people like Vito read as opportunities. He looked at her. And time. Years of time spent on something that most people in my position would say is not worth the effort. Is it worth it? Yes, he said. Without question. She held his gaze. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, I believe you. He looked at her. She watched something ease in him, some long-held thing releasing by a fraction, and she understood that he had not fully known whether she was going to stay through tonight. That the Marco situation, the warehouse, the accounts, all of it together, had been a real question about whether this was the night Sofia Marquez decided it was too much. The fact that she was still sitting there was its own kind of answer. Sofia, he said. Don't, she said. Not tonight. Tonight has been a lot. And I need to not have the big conversation tonight. He almost smiled. What do you need tonight? She thought about it honestly. More water. Possibly food. And for you to tell me something that has nothing to do with Vito Caruso. I was quiet for a moment. Then, my grandfather used to make pasta on Sunday mornings, 6 a.m. He said the secret to good pasta was not the recipe, it was the patience, and the only time he had genuine patience was before the rest of the world woke up. She looked at him. That's a good story, she said. He was a good man, Adrian said. The best one in my family by a considerable distance. Better than you. He considered it seriously. He didn't have as many things to overcome, he said. I think I'm trying to get there. She reached across the bar and took the water glass he had set in front of her earlier. She held it. Adrian Moretti trying to get somewhere, she said. That might be the most hopeful thing I've heard in years. He looked at her across the bar. The cut above his eyebrow had stopped bleeding. His shirt was still a wreck. The night had gone through 3 separate crises and was not fully finished, and somewhere across the city, Vito Caruso was recalibrating again. And Adrian was looking at her like she was the only fixed point in any of it. She felt that look all the way down. She did not look away from it. The 2 weeks that followed were the strangest and most clarifying of Sofia's life. She ran Carmine's. She opened and closed and managed the staff and handled the suppliers and kept the operation running with the same methodical competence she brought to everything. She was good at it, better than Marco had been, as it turned out, because she did not require reassurance from every delivery driver and did not apologize to difficult customers before they had actually done anything. Adrian was in and out. He stopped by every morning for the coffee she had started making without being asked. He stayed some evenings. On the nights when business required him elsewhere, he texted her, not check-ins, exactly, more like contact. Small pieces of conversation sent across the dark hours. A question about something she had mentioned. A detail from his day that he wanted to share with someone. Her. He wanted to share it with her specifically. She understood that, and she understood what it meant, and she did not minimize it by pretending it was casual. On the 8th day, Sal DeCampo came to the restaurant in the afternoon. Sofia knew who he was immediately. She had seen him once before. Charcoal suit, the authority of a man who had been in a particular world long enough to wear it completely naturally. He sat at the bar and ordered coffee and looked at her with the careful, assessing intelligence of a man who had spent 30 years reading people for survival. She made the coffee and set it in front of him and said, "He's not here." "I know," Sal said. "I wanted to talk to you." She leaned against the back bar and crossed her arms. Not defensively, just the posture of a woman who was comfortable taking up her own space. Talk. Sal looked at her for a moment. "I've known Adrian since he was 14 years old," he said. "I watched him grow up in a house that would have destroyed most people. I watched him lose his father and inherit something nobody should inherit at 26. He paused. I have watched him for 12 years run an organization with more integrity than anyone in that world expected and less recognition than he deserved. Why are you telling me this? Sophia said. Because in 12 years, Sal said, I have never seen him the way he is right now. He picked up the coffee. He did not drink it immediately. Adrian has always been contained. You understand what I mean. A man who keeps everything interior, who manages his world without letting his world see him. That is not a performance for him. That is a survival mechanism he developed very young and never had a reason to give up. He met her eyes. He's different now, and the only variable that has changed is you. Sophia looked at him steadily. Is this you telling me to be careful with him? This is me telling you that the person sitting across from you in that restaurant every morning is not performing anything. Sal set the coffee down. Whatever you think you see in him, it's real, all of it. I want you to know that from someone who has known him longer than you have. She absorbed that. I already know it's real, she said. Sal studied her. Something in his face relaxed just slightly, just enough. Good, he said. He stood up. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a card on the bar. My number. If you ever need anything, not Adrian's number, mine, you call that. She looked at the card. She looked at Sal. He's lucky to have you, she said. Sal picked up his coat. He's lucky to have you, he said. The other thing, that's just a job. He left. Sophia stood at the bar for a moment with the card in her hand and felt the quiet, cumulative weight of what her life had become in 6 weeks. She put the card in her pocket. She went back to work. On the 11th day, Vito made his next move. It did not come through the restaurant. It did not come through the organization. It came through the one channel that no one had fully anticipated. It came through Sophia's past. She found out because her phone rang at 7 in the morning with a number she recognized but had not seen in 4 years. Her cousin Elena, who still lived in the same building as Daniel Reyes. Sophia, Elena said, and the quality of her voice said everything before the words did. Someone came to talk to Daniel yesterday. About you. About the restaurant your family lost. Sophia went very still. What do you mean someone came to talk to him? A man. He didn't give a name. He asked Daniel questions about what happened with your father's restaurant, about the legal transfer, about whether there was anything irregular in the paperwork. Elena paused. Sophia, Daniel was scared. He called me this morning. He said the man who came to see him made it very clear that he was looking for leverage, something to use. The word landed in Sophia's chest like a stone. Leverage. Again. Is Daniel okay? She said. He's fine. Scared but fine. Elena hesitated. What's going on with you, Sophia? Who are these people? I'll explain later, Sophia said. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Tell Daniel the same thing. She hung up. She sat down on the edge of her bed. She turned the information over. Vito was not just watching Carmine's. He was researching her. He was going into her past, looking for something he could use not just as a threat against Adrian, but as something more specific. Something that could destabilize her directly. And the only thing in her past that had that kind of destructive potential was the story of her father's restaurant and Daniel Reyes's betrayal. She did not yet know exactly what Vito planned to do with it. But she knew one thing with complete certainty. She was not going to let him use her history against the man she loved the same way Daniel had used her father's trust against her family. She picked up her phone. She called Adrian. He answered on the second ring. Good morning. Vito is researching my past, she said. Someone went to see Daniel Reyes yesterday. Silence. 2 seconds. 3. Are you safe? He said. I'm fine. I'm at home. Elena called me. She kept her voice even. He's looking for leverage in my history. Adrian, he's going to find the story about my father's restaurant, and he's going to try to use it somehow. I don't know exactly how yet, but I know that's what this is. Sophia. I'm not calling you because I'm scared, she said. I'm calling you because you need to know, and because I want to be in this conversation, not found out about it after the fact. She heard him take a breath. "Come to the restaurant," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. We deal with this together." Together. She got up and got dressed. They dealt with it together. Adrian had people who specialized in exactly this kind of situation. The intersection of legal history and leverage attempts. By noon, there was a team of 3 people working through every document related to the original transfer of Marquez family kitchen to Daniel Reyes, looking for what Vito was likely to use and how to neutralize it before he deployed it. Sofia sat through the first hour of that meeting and told them everything. She told them about her father and the partnership and the fraudulent signatures and the 31 years of family history that changed hands in an afternoon. She told it without emotion, not because she did not feel it, but because this was not the moment for feeling. This was the moment for clarity. When she finished, Adrian looked at the 3 people across the table. "Anything Vito finds in that history gets addressed before he uses it. I don't care what it costs." The lead attorney, a woman in her 40s with the crisp efficiency of someone who had untangled complicated situations professionally for a long time, said, "There may be an opportunity here beyond just defense. If the original transfer involved fraudulent documentation, there are grounds for revisiting the legal outcome." Sofia looked at her. "What do you mean, revisiting?" "I mean that if Daniel Reyes obtained ownership of Marquez family kitchen through fraudulent means, and there is documentation of it, there are legal avenues that—" She stopped. She looked at the files in front of her. "Ms. Marquez, your father, is he still living?" "No," Sofia said. "He died 4 years ago." The woman nodded. "But the estate. If there is an estate, even a minimal one, there may be grounds to pursue recovery of assets that were illegally transferred." She looked up. "I am not making a promise. I am telling you that if Vito Caruso sent someone to look into this story, he may have accidentally pointed us towards something that was worth finding." The room was quiet. Sofia felt something she had not expected to feel in the middle of a crisis meeting about organized crime leverage tactics. She felt the specific complicated grief of a person who has been told that the thing they stopped believing in might still be possible. She had given up on any justice for her father years ago. She had put it in this category of things that did not get fixed, the category she had learned to accept, because the alternative was spending her life angry about what could not be changed. She looked at Adrian. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen from him before, something that was careful and real, and completely focused on what this moment was costing her internally, not on any strategic element of what was happening in the room. He was watching her feel something, and he was staying present with her while she felt it. She looked back at the attorney. "Do what you can, as she said. Whatever you find." 4 days later, Vito played his card. I had someone deliver a package to 3 media contacts, a compiled document purporting to tell the story of Adrian Moretti's relationship with the Marquez family, suggesting that Adrian had engineered the original theft of Marquez family kitchen to put Sofia in a vulnerable financial position, creating a situation where she would be dependent on him. It was a lie constructed with just enough real detail to be plausible. Sofia found out when a reporter called Carmine's asking for comment. She stood behind the bar with the phone in her hand and listened to the reporter read her the substance of what Vito had sent, and she felt something move through her that started as shock and arrived as something cold and focused and completely clear. "I appreciate the call," she told the reporter. "I will have a full statement within 2 hours." She hung up. She stood still for exactly 10 seconds. Then she called Adrian. "He sent the fake story to the press," she said when he answered. "About you engineering my family's situation to control me." Silence. "Sofia, I am not upset about this the way you think I am," she said. "I am not falling apart. I am thinking," she paused. "He used my father's story as a weapon. He took the worst thing that happened to my family and built a lie around it to hurt you." She felt the thing that had been building in her chest over the last 4 days sharpen into something precise and fully formed. "I want to tell the real story. I want to go on record. Not just a denial the real story. My father, Daniel Reyes, what was actually taken, and how I ended up at Carmine's, and what I found there." She stopped. "I want to take the weapon he made out of my past and dismantle it myself. The silence on the other end was long. "You understand what that means," Adrian said. "If you go public with your connection to me." "I know what it means," she said. "I've thought about it." "When did you think about it?" "In the last 4 minutes," she said. "I think quickly when I'm angry." He made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. "Sophia, this is not a small thing. Once you're publicly connected to, I am already connected to you," she said. "Vito knows it. Sal knows it. Those 3 men from the meeting know it. The only people who don't know it are the people Vito is now trying to tell his version to." Her voice was completely steady. "I would rather tell my own story than let Vito Caruso tell it for me." Silence. Then, "Are you certain?" "Completely." Another pause. Longer. "Tell me what you need," he said. "I need your attorney, the one from the meeting, and I need you to trust me to handle this the way I handle things." "I trust you," he said, immediately. No hesitation. "Completely." She felt those 2 words land in the exact place she had been keeping empty for 4 years. "Thank you," she said. She put down the phone. She sat down on the bar stool. She put her hands flat on the bar, and she thought about her father. About 31 years of work. About the way he had looked at the kitchen table in the months after the restaurant was gone, trying to find something to hold on to. About the fact that he had died before the story had a different ending. She thought about what it would mean to stand up in public and tell the real version. To take the story Vito had weaponized and give it back to its rightful owner, to her family, to her father's memory, to herself. She was not afraid. She was for the first time in 4 years something she had almost forgotten how to be. She was ready. And when the attorney arrived 40 minutes later and opened her briefcase and said, "Let's talk about what you want to say." Sofia Marquez, bartender, daughter of Roberto Marquez, builder of things that lasted, looked across the table and said with absolute calm, "I want to tell the truth. All of it. From the beginning." She had been waiting a long time to say that sentence. She found saying it now that it fit her perfectly. Like something she had always owned. Like something that had always been hers to give. The story ran on a Thursday morning. Not the version Vito Caruso had crafted. Not the carefully assembled lie built from real details and false conclusions, designed to make Adrian look like a predator, and Sophia look like a victim who did not know it yet. The real one. Sophia had sat across from the attorney for 6 hours over 2 days, and she had told everything in the precise, unflinching way that only someone who has lived a thing can tell it. She talked about her grandfather's recipes written on grocery receipts. She talked about 31 years of a family pouring themselves into something real. She talked about Daniel Reyes, and the Sunday dinners, and the legal documents, and the afternoon everything transferred out of her family's hands and into his. She talked about her father. She did not cry during the interview. She had made that decision beforehand, not because the grief was not present, because it was always present, but because she had spent 4 years watching her father's story get reduced to a cautionary tale about naivety, and she was not going to let it be reduced again. She spoke about Roberto Marquez the way he deserved to be spoken about, as a man who built something real, who trusted completely, who was betrayed not because he was weak, but because he was good, and because the person he trusted was not. She talked about New York, about Carmine's, about the man she had met in October, who made coffee and remembered small things and stopped dangerous situations with a single word. She said his name. She said it without apology and without performance, in the direct, clear voice of a woman who had decided she was done arranging herself around other people's comfort. "Adrian Moretti is trying to build something different from what he inherited," she told the reporter. "I have watched him do it. Not talk about it, do it. Every day at considerable personal cost against people who want him to stay exactly what his father was." She had paused there. "I know something about what it means to lose everything someone built. I know something about what it costs to start over from a place that wasn't your choice. I am not naive about who he is or where he came from. I am also not going to let someone use my father's story as a weapon against a man who is doing the hardest thing I have ever seen anyone do." The piece ran with her full name. With a photograph, she had approved the one where she was standing behind the bar at Carmine's, looking directly at the camera, not smiling in the way women are often expected to smile in photographs when they want to be taken seriously. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman who had decided something and was not moving. The response was immediate, and it was loud. By noon on Thursday, the story had been picked up by 4 other outlets. By evening, it was on local news. Not because of Adrian, or not only because of Adrian, but because of her father's story. Because Roberto Marquez's story turned out to be a story a lot of people recognized. Small business owners who had been maneuvered out of what they built. Families who had trusted the wrong partner. People who had sat at kitchen tables in houses that felt too big and too quiet and tried to find something to hold on to. Her phone ran out of battery twice. Renata called from Miami. She was crying before she finished saying Sophia's name. "You did it," Renata said. "You finally told it." "Someone tried to use it as a weapon," Sophia said. "I decided to take it back." "Papa would have—" Renata stopped. Started again. "He would have been so proud of you." Sophia sat very still with the phone against her ear. She let herself feel that, fully. Without managing it, or redirecting it, or putting it in a compartment to be dealt with later. She sat in it for a full minute, the specific grief of a daughter who had spent 4 years carrying her father's story, and was only now finally putting it somewhere it could breathe. "I know," she said. "I know he would have." Adrian called at 9 that evening. "Are you okay?" he said. "Better than okay," she said. "What's happening on your end?" "Vito's move has been completely neutralized," he said. "The outlets that received his version of the story are running yours instead. His sources are not verifiable. Yours are documented." He paused. "He also has a problem he didn't expect." "What problem?" "The attorney found the documentation on your father's case." His voice was careful, the specific care of a man delivering something enormous and not wanting to damage it in the delivery. "Sophia, the original transfer had 3 separate instances of fraudulent documentation. Not aggressive interpretation. Actual fraud, clearly demonstrable with the records we have." He stopped. "Daniel Reyes obtained your family's restaurant illegally. And there is now a legal team with full resources working to establish that on record." She stood completely still. "What does that mean practically?" she said. Her voice was even. It was a genuine effort to keep it that way. "It means the restaurant is still operating, under Daniel's ownership, but the legal foundation of that ownership is now being formally challenged." Another pause. "It means there is a real possibility, not a certainty, but a real possibility that what was taken from your family can be returned to it." The silence that followed was the longest of the entire phone call. "Adrian," she said. "Yeah. Did you do this because of me or because it was right?" "Both," he said. "Is that a problem?" She thought about her father. She thought about 31 years of Sunday mornings and her grandfather's recipes and the kitchen table in the house that had gotten too quiet. "No," she said. "That's not a problem." "Good." A beat. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a full day." "What happens tomorrow?" "Vito makes his next calculation," he said, "and we find out what kind of man he decides to be when the leverage he built turns out to be worthless." She trusted the certainty in his voice. She was getting better at that, at receiving certainty from someone else, and letting it be a gift instead of a variable to audit. "Good night, Adrian," she said. "Good night, Sophia." She put the phone down. She sat in the quiet of her apartment, the specific New York City quiet that was never quite silent, always threaded with the distant sound of the city, living its enormous indifferent life, and she let the day finish settling. She thought, "This is the most awake I have felt in 4 years. She thought I would not trade this for the safer version of my life." She went to sleep. Vito's next calculation arrived Friday morning, and it was nothing like any of them had predicted. Sophia was opening Carmine's when Sal DeCampo walked through the front door. He was alone, no flanking men, no performance of arrival. He looked like a man who had been up all night and had arrived at a decision that had cost him the sleep. "He's gone," Sal said. She stopped what she was doing. What do you mean gone? Vito. He left the city last night. His operation, the people who were still willing to work under him after the last month, they're in the process of reorganizing under different leadership. Sal sat down at the bar. He looked his age this morning, she thought, not old, but real. The specific realness of a person who has been in a difficult world a long time and is still standing in it. He read the story yesterday. Yours. He understood immediately that the move he made with your father's history had not just failed, but had turned completely against him. Sal paused. There is a specific kind of man who, when a strategy fails, completely cuts his losses and retreats. Vito is that kind of man. He just left, Sophia said. Just like that. Just like that, Sal said. It will not be permanent. Men like Vito do not disappear forever. But he will need a significant period of time to rebuild credibility, rebuild resources, rebuild the story he tells about himself. He met her eyes. Right now, Adrian's position is stronger than it has been since he took over from his father. What happened this week, what you did, changed the architecture of everything. She let that sit for a moment. I didn't do it for the architecture, she said. I know, Sal said. That's why it worked. He accepted the coffee she made without asking, and he sat for 20 minutes while the morning setup happened around him. And then he stood up, buttoned his coat, and said, He'll be here around noon. He has one meeting this morning that cannot move. He looked at her with the same careful assessing intelligence as the first time. He's different, you know, than he was before October. Different how? Sal thought about it for a moment. The real kind of thinking. Lighter, he said finally. Like a man who put something down that he had been carrying so long, he forgot it was possible to put it down. He picked up his coat. 40 years, I have known the Moretti family. I have watched 3 generations of men who were all capable and all damaged in their specific ways. Adrian is the first one who is also... He stopped. He seemed to be looking for the right word. The first one who is also genuinely trying, he said. Not performing decency, actually trying. That requires a level of hope that his father never had and his grandfather lost young. He looked at her. He has that now because of you. Sophia looked at the door after Sal left. She thought about hope, about what it required to maintain it in a world that provided consistent evidence against it, about a man who had inherited a shadow and was choosing every single day to stand at its edge rather than live inside it. She went back to opening the restaurant. Adrian arrived at 12:17. He walked through the back door the way he always did, and he had the specific quality of a man who had finished something. Not just completed a task, but arrived at the end of a chapter, turned the page, and was standing in the first moment of whatever came next. He sat at the bar. She set coffee in front of him. He looked at it. He looked at her. Sal told you, he said. He told me Vito left. He did. He picked up the coffee. I want to be honest with you about something. I do not think this is permanent. I think Vito will resurface in some form at some distance at some point. I know, she said. This was not a clean ending. I know that too. She leaned against the back bar and looked at him directly. Adrian, I am not expecting clean endings. I am not 22 years old looking for a story that wraps up perfectly. I am 27, and I have watched real things go badly, and I understand that life does not resolve the way you'd write it if you were in charge. She paused. What I am looking for is a person who tells me the truth and stays in the room and keeps doing the work. That's it. That's the whole list. He looked at her. That's a short list, he said. It's a hard list, she said. Don't let the length fool you. He set the coffee down. He stood up from the stool. He walked around the bar, the customer side to the employee side, the invisible line that they had maintained for 6 weeks, with the unspoken agreement that it meant something, that crossing it meant something. He stood in front of her, close enough that she had to look up slightly. She did not step back. I have been a lot of things in my life, he said. His voice was quiet and completely even the voice of a man saying the truest version of something he has said only inside himself until now. I have been a son and an heir and a boss and a problem and a solution and a threat and a name that makes rooms go quiet. He looked at her. The only thing I have wanted to be for as long as I can remember, that I could not figure out how to become, was just a person. Someone who existed without the weight of everything attached. He paused. I do not know how to fully explain what it has been like. Having someone know what I am and choose to be here anyway. Not because of the power. Not because of what I can provide. Just here. He stopped. You made me feel like a person. I need you to know that. She looked at him. She felt everything she had been carefully not feeling for 6 weeks arrive all at once. The warmth of it, the terrifying completeness of it, the way it filled exactly the shape of the empty space she had been carrying since she was 23 and told herself was fine. She said, "You have been a person this whole time. You were just the only one who couldn't see it." He reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so simple and so gentle that it undid her more thoroughly than anything dramatic could have. She put her hand against his chest. She felt his heartbeat, real and steady and right there. "Adrian Moretti," she said. "Yeah. Don't you dare mess this up." He looked at her with the real smile, the unguarded one, the one that took years off his face, and said, "Not a chance." And he kissed her. Not the dramatic kind of kiss that exists for an audience. The quiet, real kind. The kind that means I have been waiting for this exact thing, and I am not in a hurry now that I have it. The kind that says I am staying. She kissed him back with the same intention. They were standing behind the bar of a small family restaurant on the Lower East Side of Manhattan on a Friday afternoon in November, and the city was doing its enormous, ordinary thing outside, and it was not a dramatic moment in the cinematic sense. It was better than that. It was real. 3 months later, the legal challenge to the transfer of Marquez Family Kitchen reached its first significant milestone. The court found sufficient evidence of fraudulent documentation to advance the case. Daniel Reyes, as through his attorney, attempted 3 separate procedural maneuvers to have the case dismissed. All 3 failed. The documents that Adrian's legal team had located buried in the original partnership records overlooked, because no one had ever had the resources to look carefully, were unambiguous. Sophia learned about it on a Tuesday morning. She was at Carmine's. She was making coffee. Her phone buzzed with a text from the attorney. "Call me when you can. Good news." She called immediately. The attorney told her the development in precise professional terms, what it meant procedurally, what the timeline looked like, what realistic outcomes were possible. Sophia listened to all of it. When the attorney finished, there was a moment of silence. "I want to be clear about something," Sophia said. "Whatever is recovered from this case, if anything is recovered, I want it to go into a fund for small family business owners. In my father's name." She paused. "The restaurant itself, if it comes back legally, I want to give it to the neighborhood. A community kitchen. The thing my grandfather would have understood." The attorney was quiet for a beat. "That is an unusual decision," she said. "My father did not build that restaurant to make the Marquez family wealthy," Sophia said. "He built it because he believed in what it did for the people around it. I want it to keep doing that." She paused. "That's what his 31 years meant. I want to make sure it still means that." She hung up. She stood at the bar with the coffee in her hand. She thought about her grandfather at 6 in the morning, making pasta before the world woke up, because that was when he had genuine patience. She thought about the recipes on the backs of grocery receipts. She thought about her father's face at the kitchen table in the months when he was disappearing, and she thought about how much she wished she could go back and tell him, "It's going to mean something. What you built, it's going to keep meaning something." She could not go back, but she could make sure it was true going forward. That felt like enough. That felt actually like more than enough. Adrian found out about her decision that evening. She told him over dinner, not at Carmine's, but at his apartment at the table his grandfather had brought from the original restaurant when it closed, a detail she had learned recently, and that she loved more than she could explain. She told him what she had decided and why, and she watched his face while she did. He did not say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "Your grandfather started with recipes on grocery receipts." "Yes." And you want to put it back in the hands of the neighborhood? Yes. Do you know, he said, that my grandfather's original restaurant, the one my father closed, was in the same neighborhood as your father's? She stared at him. You're not serious, she said. 3 blocks apart, he said. Different cuisines, different families, probably the same customers. He looked at her with something in his eyes that was too layered to name simply. I have been thinking for the last year about what to do with the property, the original Moretti location. It sat empty for 15 years. He paused. I was trying to figure out what it should become that would mean something. She felt the realization arrive before he finished speaking. Adrian, she said. A community kitchen, he said. The Roberto Marquez Community Kitchen, if you'll allow it. Both buildings. Your grandfather's recipes on the wall. My grandfather's table in the center. His voice was steady, but she could hear something underneath it. The quiet, moved quality of a person arriving at the intersection of everything they were trying to build. 2 families who built something real in the same neighborhood at the same time for the same reasons. And 2 people, 2 generations later, who somehow ended up in the same room. He looked at her. I don't think that's coincidence. I think that's the story trying to finish itself the right way. She looked at him across the table. She looked at the table itself, old and solid, carried from one closed restaurant across a decade and a half of wrong turns, and finally arriving here in this room being used again. She thought about how things that were meant to last had a way of finding their way back. She thought about her father. She thought he would have loved this man. Not because of the power or the resources or any of the things that came with the name. Because of the table. Because of the way he carried things carefully and put them down in the right place. Yes, she said. I'll allow it. He reached across the table and took her hand, the same way he had reached for it in the restaurant the night everything broke open simply and without ceremony, like a person taking hold of something they are finally allowing themselves to have. She held on. 6 months after that, Sophia stood in front of a building that smelled like fresh paint and warm bread and possibility. The Roberto Marquez Community Kitchen opened on a Saturday in May, which was the month her father had always said was the best month in New York, the one where the city remembered it was capable of being beautiful. The neighborhood came. Not because of who Adrian was, though some of them knew. Not because of the story that had run in November, though many of them had read it. They came because a kitchen had opened on a block that had needed one, and because there was food, and because something that had been empty for a long time was full again. Sal DeCampo came. He stood in the corner with his coffee and watched the room with the expression of a man who had spent 40 years in difficult circumstances and was genuinely moved to be somewhere that felt uncomplicated. Renata flew up from Miami with her children. She stood next to Sophia and held her hand and did not say anything for a long time, and then she said, Papa would have come in first thing on a Tuesday morning and ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. Sophia laughed. He absolutely would have. He would have tipped badly and left a 5-star review. He would have called the chef over to personally compliment the bread. And then come back on Wednesday and done it again. They stood together and laughed, and were sad, and were happy, and were sisters in the specific way of people who share a loss and have decided to share the healing too. Adrian found her an hour into the event. He came through the kitchen door. He had been back there, she knew, helping with the setup, the way he had been helping with the setup for 6 weeks, the way he helped with things quietly and without announcement. He stood next to her and looked at the room. How are you? He said. Full, she said. He looked at her. Full, he repeated. Like a room that used to be empty, she said. Like something that has people in it again. He slid his hand into hers. She leaned into him slightly, just the small degree of leaning that a person does when they are in the exact right place and want their body to know it. I have something for you, he said. She looked up. What? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He held it out. She took it. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph, old, faded at the edges, taken sometime in the early 1970s, based on the quality of the film. It showed 2 restaurants on the same block, their signs visible above storefronts that no longer existed. Moretti's on the left. Marquez family kitchen on the right. Her grandfather's restaurant. His grandfather's restaurant. 3 blocks and a generation apart from everything they had become to each other. She looked at the photograph for a long time. She turned it over. On the back in her grandfather's handwriting, she recognized it immediately from the recipes, from the grocery receipts she had memorized as a child, 3 words in Spanish. Para los vecinos. For the neighbors. She looked up at Adrian. "Where did you find this?" She voice was barely above a whisper. "In the records from the original property," he said. "It was in the archive box. I think they knew each other, your grandfather and mine." He looked at the photograph in her hands. "I think this whole thing, this place, everything we've been building, I think it's been trying to happen for a long time." She looked at the photograph. She looked at the room full of neighbors eating warm food in a building that had been empty too long. She looked at the man standing next to her. Not the Mafia boss, not the bartender, not the heir to something heavy and complicated. The man. The real one. The one who carried tables across 15 years and put them down in the right place and remembered small details and made coffee before the world woke up and was every single day fighting to become the best version of something that had started out as something else entirely. The man who had let her see him and had stayed in the room while she decided what to do with what she saw. She closed her hand around the photograph. She turned and looked at him. She said, "I used to believe that people always leave when they see your weakness." He looked at her. "I know," he said. "I was wrong," she said. And Adrian Moretti, the man who had sat behind a bar for 6 weeks, making coffee, and listening carefully, and waiting for a woman who had every reason not to trust him to see who he actually was, pulled her close and held on, and the room around them was warm and full of people, and the smell of bread, and outside the window. The city was doing its enormous, ordinary, beautiful thing, and inside the building, her grandfather had written for the neighbors, something that had been broken for a very long time, was quietly and completely whole. That was the truth of it. Not the power, not the name, not the empire, or the struggle, or the long road from darkness toward something that deserved to last. Just this. 2 people who had both lost something essential, who had both spent years building walls in the shape of safety, who had ended up in the same room and been brave enough finally to stop pretending the walls were enough. Love did not save either of them from their past. It did not erase the damage or resolve the loss or make the hard things simple. What it did was exactly this. It gave them someone to stand next to while they rebuilt. And that was everything. That was the whole thing. That was enough to last.